Hey friends, Heather here from the Sewing Loft, and today I've got a fun project, the So Sweet Mini Quilt. Let's take a look at how easy it is to create the blocks. With all our pieces cut, it's time to start making the XOXO detail of our mini quilt. Starting with our small squares, you want to take a heat erasing pen and mark corner to corner. Now, since I'm working on the Baby Lock Altair, I'm going to use the laser beam guide and omit this step. Then I'm going to take my larger squares and layer my little background squares directly on them and stitch from corner to corner. And I'm going to repeat this for all my cut pieces. You can see I've chain stitched them all together, and I'm now just going to trim them apart and stitch the other side. Then trim away all of the extra seam allowance and press your seams per the pattern instructions. Now that we have them done, it's simply a matter of putting them together. And you want to make sure that you have your seams in opposite directions so that everything can nest tightly. And I'm just going to pick up two at a time and stitch them together, making sure that everything nests nice and snug. Give your seam allowance a good press per the pattern instructions, and then it's time to join them together. With our X's complete, it's time to start on the O's. Simply arrange your pieces and stitch them together to assemble your mini block. Be sure to press your seam allowance before moving on to the next step. Once our seam allowance is pressed, it's time to add the sides of our O. Using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, just line your pieces up and stitch them to join. You'll want to press your seam allowance again and complete 2 of your O's. With our X's and O's stitched, now is the time to trim them to size. If you see anything off kilter or not square, you'll just want to trim it up. Working with small pieces can be tricky, but if you continue to press everything as you go and trim to square your pieces up, everything should line up perfectly. So now I'm just going to join my 2 squares together and continue along. Press your seam allowance and trim to square everything up as needed. Then it's simply a matter of adding your final pieces to complete your mini quilt. Visit thesewingloft.com for all instructions and more pattern details.